All About Beer receives underwriting support from the Lakefront Brewery. They understand the importance of independent journalism in the beer space, and their support helps fund original work. Learn how you can affordably support journalists by visiting allaboutbeer.com/support.
Welcome to Drink Beer, Think Beer, the podcast that gets to the bottom of every pint. I'm John Hall. Let's talk about hop sensory. Last week, the Craft Brewers Conference was held in Philadelphia, and brewers from around the world worked to better understand processes, ingredients, and recipe development. One thing that I think brewers, and therefore drinkers, can always benefit from is hop sensory. There's no argument that hops bring great depth of flavor and aroma to beer. But aside from some top notes that many of us are able to pick out, there's not always a lot of extra layers discussed. So to dive into this deeper, I asked Master Cicerone Max Finnance to sit in the host seat and have a conversation with Jeff Dailey. Dailey is the sensory manager at John I. Haas in Yakima, Washington, where he leads sensory panels evaluating experimental hops, innovative products, and harvest lots. Since joining the company in 2019, he's developed the Sensory Plus quality control system and pioneered methods for detecting smoke taint and tracking hop shelf life. His work has been key in launching new hop varieties like Crush and Dulcita, products such as Lupomax Euphorix and Lupicore, and quality optimization with Galaxy and the next generation Select process. As you'll hear in a moment, this is a discussion on what goes into sensory and what brewers and consumers should know. Recorded from the Craft Brewers Conference in Philadelphia, here's their conversation.
Jeff, I'm really excited to be here with you today talking about hops, talking about hop sensory. I think it's something that a lot of brewers understand is important, but maybe don't understand the nuance of it and how we get from the field to the glass in a way that I think there's room for improvement here. So I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm nodding vigorously, agreeing with everything that you just said, because this is a visual format, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right. So let's start, follow the hops through the chain, right? What do you see as the value for brewers coming out to Yakima, doing a farm visit, seeing what hops look like in the field, and then doing some selection in person, if they can make that possibly work?
Yeah, I honestly believe that the most important thing that comes out of that is brewers understanding that hops are a natural product. Most times, especially in these days, as we're developing more and more advanced products, these liquid products, it removes brewers further and further from the fact that Mother Nature rules all of this, that it's these people in the field doing this laborious work, 80 hour, 120 hours a week to help them make the best beer possible. So I think that educational aspect is the most important part. The other hand is seeing is believing when it comes to sensory variation. So having the opportunity to move away from just, your spot selection of, what you get is what you get. It could be really, really random. But moving back towards, oh, wow, this is why there's sensory variations, is because of this natural product, and coming and seeing and smelling in the field. Man, this field that is 10 feet away from the other is entirely different, even though they're both Citra.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to get to spot purchasing versus doing your own selection. I love that. I've been out to Yakima a couple times, and I agree with you completely. I think when you go there, you get the vibe that, this is a farm town, right? And for 1, maybe 2 months a year around harvest and around selection, it turns into a farm town overrun by craft brewers and by brewers in general. And I also love that vibe. So anyone who's never experienced that vibe, it's sort of reinvigorating in the same way that coming to CBC can be reinvigorating for brewers and being surrounded by like-minded individuals. But yeah, when you walk through a hop field, to me, seeing that raw product in its most natural state, I think is a little bit eye-opening.
Yeah, absolutely. And learning, going to the field, smelling those raw hops, and even if you can do it a couple of days in a row to go back to the same field, there's so much change over that course of time. So learning to appreciate the diligent, extra effort that goes into hitting the exact pick window for each of these varieties, and going and touring while the kiln is running. I just smelled that Citra, 30 minutes ago. I picked up some wet cones from the picker, and now it's in here and it's getting hot, and you're starting to smell all these amazing aromatics come off of it. And then if you can take diligent notes about that, and finally when you get the pellets and compare them, it's oh man, this is an entire chain of events that's coming to get to the finished beer.
You have beautifully transitioned into my next question, which was going to be, right, if you've been in a field and you've smelled raw hops, and then you've smelled kilned hops, and then you've smelled pellet hops, there's drastic transformation there, right? And in my mind, and maybe it's because I don't get to do enough of that raw side, sniffing and rubbing and all that, it's very hard to smell a cone and imagine exactly how that's going to translate into the glass.
Yeah.
You mentioned something that I really like, and that's taking diligent notes. When I was doing selections for Six Point Brewery, we're relying on diligent notes taken the year before, and we're taking really good notes about everything that we're smelling, because maybe you smell something like a carrot leaf vegetal note in the raw hop, and the finished beer is not going to smell like carrot, but you like what the finished hops taste like. So next year you want to look for something that smells a little bit like carrot to you too. What kind of tips do you have for brewers who might be doing selection for the first time and don't have those diligent notes to rely on, in terms of how is the cone or the pellet, the rub, going to translate to the finished beer?
I think one of the most important things is preparation. Any degree of preparation is better than no preparation. Even just a couple of hours of sitting down and ideating on what is it when I get Mosaic that I'm looking for, what makes the best beer when I've bought Spot before. It starts at the brew house and taking notes for every batch, because you're doing the quality control anyways. You're doing VDK testing, so smell those pellets before you put them in the beer. Do tasting notes of the beer afterwards to dial in what you like versus what you don't like, and bring that with you. The unfortunate thing is, like you just mentioned, that the difference between whole cone during selection and pellet is pretty drastic. Mostly the things that translate are what you like, and unfortunately you can't rely on that though, because although there are a lot of brewers that do an amazing job selecting, somehow they're magicians at it and they've been doing it for 20 years. Some of those brewers, even though they don't mention it, they learn via a lot of failure in order to dial in their minds what that is, and they aren't thinking about how are they going to trend the next guy to do it and taking diligent notes. So again, the second thing to do is, as you're going through selection, take notes and compare them against what that preparation was in the brew house, in order to try and dial in. I really want a big tropical, but I don't want overly tropical. Think about what you need versus what you want or what you like is the most important aspect of it, because that's what's going to produce the most consistent beer year over year. We've had a lot of brewers who do a great job in coming to a Mosaic. One of my really good friends, they came in one year and they selected the dankest Mosaic possible because they had this emotional reaction to it and they really fell in love with it. Unfortunately, it became their least favorite beer that they've ever brewed, because there's that transition from the whole cone to how those bales then age for a couple weeks or a couple months at a time before then concentrating those good characteristics into highly negative characteristics in the final pellet. So the third thing that I'd recommend is work with us. Work with us before selection, work with us after selection. Let us know what you're looking for. Let us know what you like based on those brewing values and the pellet sensor that you're doing back at the brewery, and we will line up all the samples possible in front of you. And especially if you're new at it, consult with us. We're happy to be in the room and walk through with you in order to then dial in what you're looking for, because you might not have the right words for it, but because we do this with 700 brewers a year, we kind of have our own mental Rosetta Stone when it comes to the sensory of different people and what they're looking for, and we're happy to help do it.
Yeah, I think what you were just saying, I think generically that applies to most hop suppliers, right?
Yep.
If you're a brewer and you're struggling to get consistency with your hops, develop a better relationship with your hop suppliers, because they're the experts in the room, right?
Unsurprisingly, we're a business and we like happy customers, so we're willing to do whatever
right,
necessary.
Doing whatever you can to make the customer experience better. I just had this idea, so I don't know about the feasibility of it. As you were talking about that, on a previous John Hall podcast where he was interviewing Lou Bryson about how do you develop a vocabulary for whiskey, well, the first thing that Lou had said was you have to taste more whiskey, right? You have to downregulate, in the case of whiskey, you have to downregulate those pain receptors on your tongue by putting whiskey in your mouth every day for a month, and suddenly you'll get better at describing the flavors in whiskey. Yeah. Do you think there's something to the idea that smelling rubs much more often is going to help your nose get the nuance that you might miss if you just get to do this once a year?
Absolutely, because what that comes down to, and you kind of mentioned it already earlier with what you were looking for in terms of carrot or anything like that, hops absolutely have that, where the first time you smell hops, it's overwhelming. There's so much myrcene that's kind of clouding out the rest of the aromatics.
Right. It all just smells like hops.
Exactly. There's this baseline herbal aspect, there's this baseline carrot aspect, and so becoming accustomed to that and kind of smelling through the pain, so to speak, that's where you start to pick up the really delicious aromatics, lime and tangerine, or even more subtle things like stone fruit, and learning how kind of those mental ratios or those sensorial ratios between those different sub-attributes really come together to make that final pellet and therefore that final beer shine the most.
Have you guys ever considered sending brewers who you know are coming out for a selection, like a little brewer's cut a week ahead of time, and been like, get your nose ready, use this just to tune your nose up?
It's absolutely something that we consider, and it's why I have every year, my sensory team goes through 400 lots of Citra, 400 lots of Mosaic, and we get these big, multi-kilo lab composite samples, and we pack those away every crop year into Mylar, and we freeze it up, and so we have a library where we'd be happy to do that and happy to send out multiple different types of Mosaic or Citra or Cascade or Centennial in order to help these brewers prepare themselves for sure.
Cool. Going back to spot versus selection versus contracting, for a long time I thought that if you were buying hops on spot, you were automatically going to get the lowest quality, the stuff that no one else selected. I've come to learn I don't think that's true at all anymore. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, I think it absolutely used to be that way, but especially after I started, and I'm sure this is true at every broker, because Tiffany and Tess over at YCH take a lot of pride in their work too, but we've worked to use our sensory on the front end of harvest to bring a lot of information back to the growers and make sure that every lot that we're contracting is improving every year so that we can do all these amazing things where we have the biggest, most influential brewers coming in and doing their selections, but that's not turning into having lower quality material available for spots. And we aren't sacrificing the best hops possible to put into any of our other advanced products like Lupomax or the liquid extracts and things like that. And so we have a huge pool of the best hops possible, and so we're ensuring that those spot purchases, whether it's just buying our stock Citra or using one of our new it's called the next gen selection process, where we have standardized sensory profiles for each of the varieties. All of these add up to brewers having the most options possible for the best possible hops.
Yeah, and I think you sort of said the key line was best possible hops staying available. I think it's also worth noting that best possible is a little bit ambiguous, right? Because what one brewer is looking for might not be the same character that another brewer is looking for, even in the same hop. Someone might like the early pick, someone might like the late pick. And let's back up a little bit, because I just talked about pick windows, you just talked about pick windows. There's probably people listening to this, whether they're brewers or just beer fans, who don't understand how hops change through a pick window. Just to give the analogy, right, fruit, if you eat fruit when it's underripe, it tends to be more acidic. If you eat fruit when it's overripe, you tend to get much more sweetness, maybe before it starts to border on rotten. Most people like the ripe sweet spot in the middle. Some people are weird. I like my mangoes only if they're very underripe, right, on the more acidic side. Is there sort of a arc of flavor changes that happens in hops that's analogous to that?
There absolutely is, because hops are alive and they communicate with each other via developing those aroma compounds. They use that to attract pollinators and dissuade pests and things like that. And at the same time, they're doing that where early on, the hops only have a bit of myrcene and some of the sesquiterpenes that make it a little woody and grassy, and they build up towards a certain level of ripeness that we prefer, where there's a good balance of those sesquiterpenes, the thiols that everyone's craving, and those come together to make a maximal sort of tropical fruit or citrus or things like that. But then as the hops continue to hang, some of those compounds start to oxidize, they start to turn really overly vegetal in like a red onion sort of way. But there are certain varieties that are at their best where you have to let them hang because of that chemistry going on, where like El Dorado, for instance, is one of my favorite hops, and Eric Demeray is a master at doing this, where he lets it hang as long as possible in order to get some of those compounds to oxidize, because the alpha, and this goes really deep into the weeds. When alpha starts to oxidize.
I love deep in the weeds. Don't stop.
So when people talk about cheesy hops, because those hops have aged a little bit, that's the alpha turning into isovaleric, and just getting just enough because the hops are hanging in the field just, quote, a little too long. That's what really brings out the pineapple character in El Dorado. So these farmers are taking advantage of that natural chemistry to choose the right pick window based on the brewers and what they're looking for.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe, generally speaking, that like the onion garlic character that some brewers really enjoy, some brewers really dislike, is also sort of a late pick characteristic.
Yeah, absolutely, because like some of those compounds start to oxidize, the thiols start to blow away and oxidize, and all that's remaining are these really heavy thioesters that create that the red onion, the super dank garlic, and things like that.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was the first time I was out in Yakima, I was talking to a farmer, and we were talking about onion character and hop, and he kind of laughed and said to me, Max, I can make any hop I grow extra oniony, or I can make any hop I grow not have any onion character at all. You just tell me when you want me to pick it.
Yep. Yeah.
And those are the types of things that I don't like to play. To go off on a tiny tangent, I don't like to play the hop guessing game very often. I think it's a easy game to look like an idiot when you're playing.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because there's so much overlap between the hops, and some people would say, oh, if you smell onion, it must be X, or if you smell grapefruit, it must be Y. Citric can smell like a million different things, depending on which side of the valley you grow it on, when you pick it.
Yeah, so every year at the National Hop Growers Convention, there's this competition called Hop Knows It All, and I have lost it every single year. I think I feel pretty good when I get 2 out of like the 20 samples right. It's incredible how much variation there is, and it's honestly, it's kind of embarrassing because I smell literally every variety in dozens and dozens and dozens of different lots every year, and I can't pick out freaking Cascade sometimes.
I'm really happy to hear you say that because last month I was up in Albany, New York for the New York State Brewers Conference, and they were doing a similar competition, and I think they had 12 cups lined up, and I smelled the cups and I said, nope, I'm not even going to put my name in that hat because I'm going to look really stupid.
Yeah, but as embarrassing as it is, it's a really good demonstration that brewers should hone in on the sensory descriptions of the varieties rather than the brand names themselves, because sometimes, the spot Citra that you bought is not the Citra that you need, going back to that line. And so if you can find something like an early pick Columbus, something else that has different sensory characteristics, you can blend those back in order to get your target true to brand in the beer. And it comes to looking for those sensory characteristics rather than relying on a certain brand name for different varieties to get you where you're trying to go.
To change gears, pivot for a second, just to use a specific example, right? I have found personally that I don't like Sabro hops. And I'm learning, especially this week, walking around the floor and tasting some samples, I'm learning quickly that I don't like Dulcita hops either, because I think they have a very similar dill, vegetal, herbal note that turns into sort of a sunscreen tropical note at higher concentrations for me, very similarly to each other. Is there a cheat code or a way that brewers could sort of smell a rub or smell pellets and identify those sorts of things as danger, no, I don't like this, before they actually brew a beer with it? Or is it you just have to trial?
It's a little bit of A, a little bit of B, because part of what's going on here is individual sensitivities to different compounds. That's a big aspect of it. I would love to do the genetic testing, but I'm pretty convinced that for people that don't like Sabro and Dulcita, first of all, they're wrong. Second of all, there's sort of a cilantro effect, if you're familiar with that, where some people get soapy, some people get this delicious sort of citrus herbal, and I really do firmly believe that there's something going on with Sabro and Dulcita that is in that vein. However, there's 2 aspects that I'd encourage people to look at. First, if you're rubbing the pellets, or if you can come rub the whole cone, especially for Sabro, look for lots that have a really nice acetone sort of character. I know that seems counterintuitive because acetone, fusels, bad fermentation, that sort of thing, but that's a really good indication that Sabro is going to turn into a really amazing sort of tangerine stone fruit rather than that sunscreen dill aspect. The second thing to look for is high amounts of cedar. Cedar, especially in Dulcita, Sabro, and to a lesser extent Crush, really means you're going to get an aggressive sort of bully character. So those are the things on the sensory side for selection that are really important for those 2 varieties. On the other hand, hot side use, Whirlpool especially. In that case, you're going to dissolve out all the really nice fats that that yeasts use to make those delicious ester characteristics, and it's going to blow off a lot of those compounds that turn into the dill, that turn into the cedar, that you especially, Max, don't seem to prefer.
I've been wrong before. I'm okay with being wrong. I think it is pretty divisive, though, and I would agree. I love cilantro, but I know people who don't, so there probably is something to it like that. Do you think every case is like the Sabro example, where there are certain specific precursors you can look for and know you enjoy or know you should avoid? Are there any general rules that we could apply and say, other than take some good notes and apply them, if there's families of flavors that you don't like, then you should look for this family of flavor?
That's a really hard question to answer because, again, the individuals involved and their individual sensitivities means that, and this as a sensory expert, your tangerine is not my tangerine to begin with, and the assumptions, I want floral. Well, my floral leans in a lavender direction. Yours probably leans to a rose when it comes to that mental picture. So the real key is to just take notes, know who you are, know who your team is, because a lot of times it's not just one person with the golden nose coming out, which, again, hate that term. But it's about working together to understand each other's lexicons and come up with that information ahead of time, so you know when you're doing those selections, either here in Yakima or especially, we're happy to send you samples. We'd love you to come out, but you don't have to. Working together to understand each other at a human level is the way that you're going to be able to move forward to choose the right hops.
Yeah, and again, I think that applies pretty generically too, right? Like hop suppliers everyone I've ever talked to says, come visit us, come see the farms, come see harvest, come do selection, right? But if you can't make it, we understand times are tight in the craft beer world right now. Lots of folks can't justify an extra trip out to Yakima for selection. The better relationships you form with those suppliers, the less you're relying on just buying spot offline randomly, the more you're going to get communication that can be helpful to you.
Yeah, reach out, create a relationship with us, ask the question. A lot of times there's brewers they don't know that they're allowed to ask for something in particular. They don't know what they don't know. So if you're thinking, spot is spot, and therefore there's no point in me asking, can I get a certain type of thing? Just please don't. Again, cynically, we're a business and we want you to be happy.
What's the question that you get that you really hate getting? Not the no stupid questions, but maybe the no stupid questions. But what's the one that you were like, oh man, this question again?
Why can't I select Galaxy?
And the short answer for people that don't.
So the short answer comes actually down to the chemical quality of Galaxy as a hop, where if we delayed things out, for even 2 weeks to allow for selection, Galaxy has this aging profile. It ages really, really rapidly in bale form. So the best way for us to make the best possible Galaxy is actually to process it into pellets as soon as possible. And so the answer is, if you want good Galaxy, you shouldn't select it. In fact, because we're taking care of that on the front end by doing the sensory quality control. And once it's pelletized, that high quality is locked in. And so if you want to do a type of selection, ask for different pellet samples. Because again, we love you to come out to Yakima and smell the whole cone. But the fact of the matter is, all brewers, or at least 99% of them, you're going to be brewing with pellets and not whole cones. So why not do the quality control on your actual ingredient?
So you can still do, just to clarify, you can still do selection on Galaxy. You're just doing it at the pelletized stage rather than whole cone
exactly.
stage.
Let us know the type of Galaxy that you're looking for, and we'll probably be able to send 2, 3, or 4 samples. Because we work really closely with Yakima Valley hops, and they do an amazing job taking these 20-pound bags and turning them into little 2-ounce samples. They've been doing that for 20 or 15 years. Yep. And so we'll have a store of all the different varieties, all the different pellet lots, and we'll send them out to you.
Great. What's your favorite question to get from brewers?
What's your favorite hop and why is it Mosaic?
Is it Mosaic?
It actually is. Our illustrious host is making faces at me because he is well known for hating Mosaic. Again, it's all right to be wrong.
I mean, everyone likes a Hallmark movie once in a while.
It's true. And the reason I like Mosaic is everyone loves Citra. Citra can be used in everything. You can add Citra to any beer. It's one of those hops that makes every beer better. I think that there's a certain quality to Mosaic that it's a little bit more finicky, and so it requires a certain level of kind of care and dedication, and quite honestly a little ballsiness to say, I'm going to make a single hop Mosaic beer, and it's going to be the best beer you've ever had. Yeah.
I can empathize with John and his dislike of Mosaic. I tend to lean on your side of the fence on that one. I think but you mentioned finicky. I think it tends to be a very variable hop. So when Mosaic is good, I think it can be an incredibly beautiful hop. I think there's a lot of lackluster beers out there. Yeah. Like you said, it's a little bit of a ballsy decision.
Yeah, and that's why, like I said, Citra makes every beer better, so that's why most beers are Citra and Mosaic.
Sure. Well, that stole my next question. I was going to ask what your favorite hop was, but I'm glad it's your favorite question. What would you give to brewers as general advice other than preparation in terms of, if they do want to come out, planning a successful trip to Yakima? Other than go to sports bar and
the sports center is not what it used to be, unfortunately. I think the new hotspot is what we lovingly refer to as Stabbies in Yakima. It's very true to Yakima in its case. It's actually called Brews and Q's. It's a lovely spot, but it has that old sort of dirty dive bar vibe that the sports center used to have. Please go to sports center, but there are lovely folks that own that place, and it's a fun spot.
Yeah, that shows it's been a couple of years since I've been out, so I guess I need to come visit you guys again soon.
I guess the other advice I'd be is Be honest, be open. Again, communication is the number one part of sensory, and it's the thing that's going to get you the furthest in terms of getting the best hops possible. So let us know ahead of time what you're looking for. Be there, ask questions while you're doing it. Don't feel like there's any pressure at all. Take the time that you need and come with notes and take data. Any data is better than no data, because you're going to take your notes back from what you selected and say, well, this year the pellets are really different from what we thought we selected. What did we do wrong? What can we do better next year? And importantly, again, communication. Ask those questions to us when you notice something, because we're here to help 365 days a year and twice on Sunday.
And that sort of tailors into my next question as well. If a brewer gets home and they're making beer and they realize that they're not getting what they thought they were getting, are there things that you can do sort of mid-year to help them pivot so that they're not stuck with a hop they don't love for the next year?
Yeah, absolutely. That's goes into kind of a sales and supply chain thing that I don't have a lot of insight on. But from a technical side for improving the beer in terms of what you're looking for, we're happy to consult down, send you some other samples to give you an idea of what you might be looking for next year. Or, like I said, different hops work well together. So looking at the sensory profiles, my Mosaic isn't doing this, what can we do? Well, it sounds like it's missing a little bit of this. So let's throw in a little bit of Columbus or a little bit of El Dorado to move your beer back in the direction that you're looking for.
Cool.
Yeah.
Just take a step backwards. What general tips do you have for people who are trying to get better at their vocabulary for hops?
Well, like you said in the whiskey example, it's smelling a lot of things. We have a standardized sensory lexicon that we put out there about 9 years ago called Hopsest, and that came from the fact that people were struggling with a standardized understanding of how to smell hops. And so we went through and smelled every variety, a lot of different lots, and kind of classified, working with perfumists to come up with a lexicon. So smelling a lot of different hops, looking at the different available lexicons out there, and then translating that into, well, everyone's saying that these hops have passion fruit. Do I actually know what passion fruit is? And going to your local markets, finding those actual fruits and dried flowers and fresh flowers and things like that in order to train and retrain your brain to move in that direction of what positive characteristics am I looking for. Because I think a lot of times we're so hung up in this industry, rightfully, training on faults and things like that, looking for trans 2-nonenal, and that rewires your brain in a certain direction where you're missing the forest for the trees. So you have to kind of do the mental exercise of looking for what actually is pineapple rather than is that isovaleric.
Yeah, and now it's my turn to be nodding vigorously as you're saying that, because I always love to, whether it's a professional conversation I'm having or just talking to my friends about how did you get so good at describing beer, right? Sensory doesn't start and end in the brew house or at the brewery or at the tap room. Sensory and developing that flavor vocabulary is a 24/7, 365 exercise, right? And I love to use the grocery store example too. Next time you're in the grocery store, pick up an orange. Remind yourself of what an orange smells like. Pick up a tangerine. Notice the differences between the two. And, you don't have to buy them all. You can do it in the produce section for free.
Yeah.
And then it's also a great reason when you buy some produce to go home and wash it before you eat it, because there's some weirdo like me smelling it all.
Yeah, and for people that are struggling to do this sort of thing, one of the best tools that I've found, and I noticed it improved, it's my job to do this, and even I learn and grow a lot. And actually moving to meal kits, like the Blue Aprons and stuff like that, where you buy new diverse meals and you start to cook with those and make that a part of your life, where you're smelling something new, tasting something new, and that having that new experience creates new memories. And the smell to memory pipeline in your brain is one of the strongest evolutionary signals that you have as a person. And so increasingly doing new experiences and finding joy in those new experiences is what's going to give you the healthiest, strongest vocabulary.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. What else do you want to talk about that I haven't asked you about so far?
As a lot of people are aware, the western states are having the worst year of this 20-year mega drought in existence. We're down to about 10% snowpack here in the Pacific Northwest, and because the hop fields, both for the Willamette area and for the Yakima Valley and even southern Idaho, those are all based on irrigation. We rely on that snowpack as sort of a savings account when it comes to the water to make it all the way through the end of October. When everything's grown, picked, and harvested. So it's going to be a real struggle here, and we're consulting really closely with all of our growers to find options, working with the local irrigation districts to make sure that we're getting the right allocations at the right time throughout the year. But unfortunately, there's going to be a potential struggle, and it's going to be it's going to be a really good learning opportunity for me and my team, because there's a lot of theories out there about how it's known that in the wine industry, stressing out grapes by reducing their irrigation at certain points can produce some really amazing results. And we have never had to do that with hops before. So this might actually end up being a banner year. And we're going to learn that maybe we don't need to be quite so aggressive with our irrigation like we thought.
So that was where I was going to go with my next question. There's no data out there yet to say what happens when hops get slightly less irrigation. Is it a go, no-go, or does the character change, and how?
There's very little research. I know that the USDA, via the Hop Research Council, has done a little work on drought tolerance and stress tolerance in Cascade. But Cascade is a very, very different beast than Citra, Mosaic, Simcoe, these other high aroma varieties. Yeah.
Interesting. So I guess we're all sort of learning together what it's going to look like for hop growers but as culture shifts, as climate shifts and as growing regions maybe shrink or grow in other parts of the world. And
we're all going to be learning together. And I really want to emphasize for all the brewers that are listening that we're going to do everything in our power, with my sensory team doing the quality control to make sure that the best hops possible get out there. We're going to be learning and growing about this year, and we're going to be as transparent as possible communicating that, because we're all in this together.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty clear at this point, these are long-term realities. This is not a one-year thing. This is not something that we can say, oh, next year will be better, right? We need to learn and adapt, and if that means changing the agronomics or changing the growing practices or changing brewing techniques.
And then that's a big part of our program with the hop breeding company, where our whole goal is breeding the most agronomically sound hops possible. And so we have a lot of hops in the pipeline that we're hoping are going to be much more drought tolerant than finicky varieties like Centennial, and probably Citra is in a similar boat there.
I love Centennial, so it's always sad when I hear that, but you're not the first person I've heard say that.
Yeah. Man, I'm really glad we're I don't know if we're ending it, but we're really ending on a high note. Jeez. Doom and gloom about droughts.
Yeah. Well, I will say it's been a pleasure sitting down with you. I've learned a lot about hops today, and I appreciate you taking the time, Jeff.
Yeah, happy to be here, Max. Hopefully we can talk about it again soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My thanks to Max and to Jeff. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. As always, you can reach me on email at johnhall@allaboutbeer.com. That's JOHNHOLL at allaboutbeer.com. Make sure you join the This Week in Rauch Beer group on Facebook, or follow at TW Rauch Beer on Instagram. Upload your photos, join the conversation. And you can help us, support us, by visiting allaboutbeer.com/support. When you're at the website, you can check out new content as well as the archives going all the way back to 1979. You can also follow all of the links to follow All About Beer on social media. If you like smart audio content, a reminder that All About Beer has a separate podcast channel. Search and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice to listen to shows like Brewer to Brewer, which is now a weekly show, the All About Beer podcast with Em Sauter and Don Tess, One Iconic Beer with Jeff Allworth, which is also a monthly show. Steal This Beer has new episodes every Monday. The BYO Nano podcast comes out on the 15th of every month. And on this show, Nate Schweber does our music, Jeff Quinn designs our logo, and I'm John Hall. New episodes come out every Wednesday, and that's when I'll be back again to drink beer and to think beer.